Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good. So, listen, I know you want to talk about affirmative action, all the important Supreme Court cases. However, as it happens, it's my week to do the opening, which means we're going to spend a little time in Russia, and then we'll get to your stuff, okay?
I anticipated this.
Okay. So here's your quiz. Now, I'm going to read you 2 consecutive tweets from Michael McFaul, former ambassador to Moscow, current social media star and Russia hawk. And I want you to tell me which word or phrase in these 2 tweets does McFaul seem to not know the meaning of? Okay?
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Quote, Putin talked tough in his national address. He sounded like someone preparing for a big fight. But when faced with the difficult decision of trying to stop Wagner mercenaries with major force, he backed down. He didn't escalate. He didn't need a face-saving off-ramp to declare victory. When facing the possibility of really losing to Wagner mercenaries coming into Moscow, he just capitulated. What's the answer?
Those are 2 tweets or 1 tweet?
Those are the 2 tweets.
Capitulate.
Very good. Now, why is he misunderstanding the word capitulated, Mickey?
Because he's trying to make the argument that full force in Ukraine will not, Putin doesn't need an off ramp to negotiate. We can go at him with full force, and he'll negotiate out of weakness. I think Lawrence Friedman sort of made the same point, or maybe I'm confusing the 2.
Everyone's making it. All the hawks are making it.
Is Friedman a hawk?
Oh yeah. Let me add, by the way, that it's more than that. McFaul is explicitly arguing that what we've learned from this crisis is that you don't need to worry about Putin using a nuclear weapon. You get him in a corner and he capitulates. He doesn't use force. Okay, that's the argument. And I wrote my full response to this in today's Nonzero newsletter. People can check it out. But back to the word capitulated. What does that word mean to you? And why would you say it does not apply to what Putin did?
Well, it means you surrender. It means you surrender on the enemy's terms. And in fact, Putin, exiled the guy. He may or may not incorporate the Wagner units in the military. He may prosecute the head of Wagner. And the Wagner guy backed down. So it's not clear that both sides got something in this negotiation.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to prosecute Prigozhin, but Prigozhin had 3 demands. Do not integrate the Wagner forces in Ukraine into the Russian military. A, fire the defense minister. B, fire this guy Gerasimov, who's head of the equivalent of head of the Joint Chiefs, I guess. Those are the 3 big demands. 0 for 3, plus you're exiled. Yes, you can take those Wagner troops who want to go into Belarus with you, fine, but they can't have heavy armaments. Leave the tanks and big weapons here.
Well, I thought the jury is still out on the defense minister. He could still be canned. Yeah, after a decent interval.
He could be, but McFaul has finished with this Twitter thread, and he says that Putin's already capitulated, and he hasn't.
Walter Russell Mead had an interesting argument for why Putin likes this defense minister. He's not an ethnic Russian, therefore he has a small power base. He can't overthrow Putin easily. So he's weak. So he likes him not to have a lot of contacts in the rest of the military.
This is Shoigu. They go way back, too. He trusts him. I mean, Putin values loyalty above all. But it really is important to understand that by my lights, Putin handled the situation close to as well as he could have. Now, it's probably his fault for being there in the first place and not clipping Prigozhin's wings much earlier, because he's been a growing problem. But once the guy is marching with 5,000 well-armed men in Russia, you have to understand something. those men are considered war heroes in Russia. You know, another thing you heard was, wow, now we know that Ukraine can just march in there. No, I think Putin would be a little less ambivalent about killing Ukrainian soldiers than about killing these Wagner guys who they're the most successful troops that Russia has in Ukraine, and people know that.
Once, one point Friedman made, which I think seems to be true, is that all of his troops are in Ukraine. Putin didn't have all that many troops back home guarding the fort.
I think that's true.
His position was a little more precarious than he'd like. I guess he still had the Air Force, but you know, they shot down some people.
Yeah, they did. It turns out that Wagner had effective anti-aircraft weapons. Yeah, he could have won, but in the long run. But you're right. I mean, what would be catastrophic? Again, this is a formidable force. What would have been catastrophic is if he has to start withdrawing troops from Ukraine to fight them, which is not completely inconceivable. That's a bad look, and that could start a cascade. I mean, he basically had all bad options, and you know, he look, if you have to pick one guy who won and one guy who lost, he's not the guy who lost. It did reveal a certain weakness in the regime, kind of, and it may have made it weaker. That may all be true, but you know, if McFaul actually understood the argument that those of us who are concerned about nuclear war are making, he'd realize that the weaker Putin feels his regime is, the more concerned we think you should be. That's our argument, at least. And at some point he should show signs of comprehending it, but so far he doesn't.
Do you think this means that the war in Ukraine will go worse for Putin because he's losing his best troops? Bakhmut is back. The Ukrainians are retaking this meaningless town, but they're trying to surround a bunch of Russian troops. And I was reading one commentary where it said, well, then he'll have the choice of either resign or use nukes. Not a choice we wanted to make.
Not a choice we wanted to make. I mean, there are no signs that it's affecting the battlefield in a big way. You know, Wagner had pretty much withdrawn from Bakhmut already. It's true that Ukraine is making a big fight of Bakhmut, and I wonder if that's partly because they want to have some kind of trophy to wind up with, although they're a long way from capturing it. You know, because things continue to not go that well in the South. I think long run, it could hurt the effort in Ukraine in various ways, conceivably. One of them is actually to make Putin more reluctant to get rid of these these apparently incompetent guys at the top of the military structure, just because now it looks bad for him to do it now that Prigozhin has demanded it. But there's various ways it could hurt. I mean, it's certainly absorbing his focus, and he may wind up doing something with this guy Surovikin, who was said to be something of a Prigozhin sympathizer. You know, a general who they're investigating, who may be in jail. He's one of the most competent generals they have. That would be a big loss. I actually think if Putin were smart, unless he can really implicate him in the plot, which seems unlikely because Surovikin was the first big guy to come out on video and say, no, stop, to Prigozhin. Now, people said, looked like a hostage video, looked like he was drunk. Well, it was Friday night. Of course he's drunk, but you know, you can't have everything. He didn't have a heads up. That's just more evidence he didn't have a heads up. He would have been sober.
There have been various conflicting stories about how much we knew. The initial story, of course, was, oh, we knew everything. Our super great intelligence community sees all. I thought that was just self-serving PR for them.
Yeah.
Then it came out that we knew nothing, and now it's coming out that we really did know more than know quite a bit. And I'm wondering, did we tip Putin off? Wouldn't that be rational for us to do? Because we need Putin's cooperation. He's better than what's going to come down the road.
Right.
If he's beholden to us, that lowers the temperature quite a bit.
Yeah. I wondered about that because a rational president might worry about instability in Russia, even though he might say no. Well, you could argue it either way. I wondered about that. I kind of seriously doubt it. I'd be surprised if we didn't know a little while in advance, because, this thing was had to be planned, and a certain amount of stuff had to be repositioned in preparation for it. And we have pretty good intelligence. It's kind of shocking if Russia was really taken by surprise, although I guess they were. But the other, just one kind of related thing is people are, in terms of assessing the stability of the regime, a lot of people are acting as if, the military chose not to act. Here's a paragraph from a Wall Street Journal, a reported piece, like second paragraph or something, says Putin's authority has been damaged by his inability to crush the mutiny. Russia's regular army mostly stayed on the sidelines while Wagner troops headed for the capital. The assumption seems to be that Putin gave them some order to fight, and they didn't. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. It makes perfect sense that Putin would be very reluctant to engage them in battle for reasons I just stated. And so, I think the other thing is it's like, I mean, remember, nobody signed on with Prigozhin. Not a single prominent voice piped up and said, I'm with you. And I think he thought that would happen. And there's not going to be another threat like him. This is completely unique. A guy who has thousands of well-armed, loyal soldiers of his own in his own little militia. And so I just wouldn't overstate the magnitude.
Oh, no. I mean, there are
this.
other people who could threaten him. Putin has a whole, there's a whole bureaucracy of generals and apparatchiks in the various defense
if the
ministries.
Military turns on him,
at some point they could say, sorry, Vladimir, you're not in control anymore. And what can he do? Punch him out?
That can happen. It's just harder if there's, this was a case where you had a charismatic guy with these troops who were already his guys. They weren't part of the Russian military. Okay. Now there are still some private forces, but they're run by corporations and stuff. They're just not as big a deal. So I don't know. It's I guess
you on Twitter steered people to a website that discussed in great detail the guy who called Putin Botox. And in great detail all the various machinations in the Russian bureaucracy, which is much deeper than we normally find out from reading the U.S. dailies. But there was a guy named Strelkov, I think. Who I'd never heard of. And
he's an interesting character.
I know nothing about him.
He also, what's his other name? He has a nom de guerre and a name. So he's a complicated figure. He is a guy who used to be in Russian, maybe with the FSB or something. But in 2014, after the election, and I think after they took Crimea, he apparently of his own volition went into the Donbass, and, he's a Russian guy, and helped organize what was already, I think, an incipient, separatist rebellion. And it's not clear that he had the authority of Putin. In any event, he was eventually sidelined. He was held responsible for the shooting down of that airliner, if you remember. Gherkin is his other name. He's an interesting guy to watch. He's kind of like Prigozhin in that he's like a loose cannon, very critical of the defense establishment. But he and Prigozhin hate each other, and he has no real power. I think he's probably located in the Donbass. He's just an entertaining social media presence, basically. The one other thing in terms of, back to the offensive. Okay, quickly before we turn to your stuff, the offensive continues to move only slowly in the South. I think the way to think of this is, the crumple zone on a car. Is that what they call it? Where like in a collision, it crumples. It's supposed to crumple, but it isn't just supposed to crumple. It's also supposed to absorb the momentum of the oncoming vehicle.
Right.
In the South, the Ukrainian troops are still in the crumple zone. In other words, Russia expects them to get through there. They just want to make sure and take enough of a toll on Ukrainian forces before they get to the main line of defenses. So far, I would say the crumple zone is working. A while ago, I heard that, just as one kind of index, that 15% of the Bradley fighting vehicles we sent them are either destroyed or out of commission through damage or being left on the battlefield or something. Just keeping track of the video stuff since then, I'd say it's now over 20%. If that's representative of, like, the other armor they have and various other things, then yeah, the crumple zone is working much better than the Ukrainians would like. But we'll see. Another thing to keep an eye on, Ukrainians made a river crossing. Remember, the dam blew up. It reconfigured the shoreline.
Right.
Now, Russians who said that Ukraine blew up the dam, and I think if either side blew it up, it was Ukraine, but said, well, we'll see if they now stage a big crossing after a while, we'll know it was them. Well, they're doing something of a crossing. It's mainly by bridge. I think it's a little amphibious. I do think a flood like that almost inherently favors the offense, because the defensive lines get all discombobulated, and offensive lines, almost by definition don't.
Are flexible.
Yeah. And so that could change. Plus, there's just a whole bunch of new borderline the Russians have to worry about by virtue of the reservoir drying up. What I'm talking about now is below the dam, but there's also above the dam new possible threats. And then finally, we're sending them more weapons. It looks like we are going to send them these so-called ATACMS, missiles with 190-mile range. And now they're talking about sending them cluster munitions. I mean, basically what's happening is, like, the worse the offensive goes, the more carnage we're willing to sponsor, right? I mean, that's almost what's going on, is the worse it goes, the faster we want to send them new stuff. And there's a lot of carnage on both sides. And I, again, don't think this is wise.
So what's the optimistic view? What is, it sounds like if the Russian lines hold, Putin can say we've blunted the offensive. And what does Putin negotiate, when he's weak or when he's strong? I haven't figured that out. You're supposed to negotiate when you're weak, but Putin seems to be an exception, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that. Well, I think everybody's more inclined to negotiate or to negotiate on, more forgiving terms, more favorable terms for the other side when they're weak. That includes Putin. I think he's ready. I think he'd be ready for a ceasefire now. I was listening to this retired general named Ryan, who actually believes it's likely that Russia will use nuclear weapons. I think is still at Harvard's Belkin Center, smart guy. He was saying he thinks Putin's ready for a ceasefire now. It's Zelensky who's not ready for a ceasefire. I mean, he says he thinks Putin would settle for these lines. They got the land bridge, and I suspect that the attempted mutiny makes him, if anything, a little more willing to settle for a ceasefire now. I think he's ready. When Michael McFaul says things like, well, we have to push them, we have to, attack Crimea before they'll be ready to really negotiate, that's because his definition of negotiating is for Putin to be willing to surrender all occupied territory, Crimea, the Donbass, everything. And that's never going to happen. But that's what McFaul means by Putin being, quote, ready to negotiate. I think he's ready now more than Zelensky, if what you want is a ceasefire.
Right, but I'm saying if should be rooting for the counteroffensive to succeed or peter out. If you want negotiations, it sounds like you want it to peter out, because then Zelensky maybe will be ready to negotiate. But intrinsically, obviously, you want Ukraine to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes Zelensky less inclined to negotiate, even if the offensive fails, is our just continuing to pile new weapon systems on him. It's almost, it's not an incentive to fail, but it's a reason that failure won't push him to the negotiating table.
Here's a technical question. If a Bradley fighting vehicle goes over a mine, is it destroyed and all the people killed, or is it strong enough to withstand a mine?
I think it's good at keeping the people inside safe. But I think, there was a horrifying video. This is just the most compelling war is hell video I've ever seen. And it was a number of Bradleys. They had obviously run into a minefield. There were several soldiers who had hit, anti-personnel mines. They're lying there. They can't move. and obviously the guys trying to help them are kind of afraid to move very far. The
Right.
Bradleys are afraid to move very far. Everyone's kind of creeping. It's like a 7-minute video. And then at the end, there's a guy who seems to be a medic. He's poised on the edge of the Bradley and he's looking like, where can I step? Where can I, he wants to go help these guys. He
Right.
steps off, the landmine hits him. And it's pretty vivid. Basically, bottom of his leg is gone. It's hanging by a thread. Because he's a medic, he knows to take the tourniquet out and tie off his own leg. And they pull him back in the vehicle. And I mean, but he's lost the leg. But I just mean the whole thing. And look, the video is put out by the Russians to convey that war for the Ukrainians is hell. And so they have this kind of eerie atonal music. But it does accurately convey that this is just a situation like this is just the very definition of hell. And we have the power to stop this if we want. Not much is going to change on the ground, if you ask me, in our favor, without significantly increasing the chances of catastrophic escalation. And meanwhile, we're very casually making these decisions that mean, among other things, that a bunch more Ukrainians are going to die, many of whom don't want to be there. They were drafted. And I just think it's criminal.
Now,
Now,
are we in it?
yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead. No, I was going to say over to you for the Supreme Court, but go ahead. Ask one more.
It's just weird how Putin went from being toast. He's the dead man walking. He's finished. It shows fatal weakness to being, he's like Stalin. He's going to purge the forces and he'll be stronger like Erdogan after a coup attempt. That has to factor in our calculation too. If we leave Putin in place and we settle the war, do we want Putin to stay in place? I think we do. I mean, Biden said Putin must go, but I don't think we like what comes after Putin.
No, what comes after Putin is not going to be Navalny or Thomas Jefferson. So I don't think there's any reason to think it would be better. I personally think instability could be dangerous. So that's my line. By the way, quick correction. I think last week I played some audio from a guy. I may have identified him as Jack Watling, who is one kind of mainstream Ukraine analyst, but it was Mark Hertling, a retired general and commentator. So I think I probably got that wrong. So there's more I could say, but I can save it for the Parrot Room. We can maybe talk more about this in the Parrot Room. Meanwhile, we turn to you for guidance on all matters Supreme Court.
Well, the Supreme Court issued its big affirmative action ruling declaring that race preferences are unconstitutional. It basically, the lay of the land is it had previously declared that, making up for past wrongs, giving an underrepresented group a boost, is not a justification for race preferences. The only justification that counted, according to the court, and this is one man's opinion, Justice Powell as the swing vote in the Bakke case, was diversity. And in this case, the Supreme Court said diversity is not enough, and they basically bent over backwards to kill the idea that diversity could justify race preferences. So much so that it didn't really make that much sense. I mean, diversity obviously is it seems to me, a legitimate thing for a university to try. But the court said, well, because there's no way to measure the benefits of diversity and, there's no time limit, blah, blah, blah. Roberts came up with a bunch of seemingly bogus reasons for killing diversity, dead. But that's clearly what he wanted to do. The real reason is it's fake. I mean, they're saying they're doing it for diversity. Really, they're doing it to make up for previous sins and all the reasons people wanted race preferences.
What does that even mean? You mean the motivation that's actually in the heart of admissions officials is that, or what? What do you mean?
I'm saying that the motivation at the heart of the admissions is they want to let as many blacks and Latinos in as possible.
Of course, but that doesn't speak to what the motivation is.
That is their motivation.
Edward that's a goal. What is their motivation?
The dean of Bolt is on tape saying that that's his motivation. What is, sorry?
Well, they want it. Yes, obviously the goal of affirmative action is to get more minorities in of certain groups than would otherwise be there.
Right.
Right. But how do you tell whether the motivation is to increase diversity or make up for past wrongs?
I guess the argument is that if you're making up for past wrongs, you want an ethnic composition that at least replicates the black proportion of the population, 11%. If you just want diversity, well, it's like a petting zoo. You want a zebra and an emu and an antelope. Okay, you don't need 11% blacks. You just need a few representative blacks, and you also need a bunch of other people like Trobriand Islanders and Indians and Ceylonese and people with one leg, and you would engage in a whole bunch of other things. And the argument of Dahlia is that diversity can't carry the weight of getting 11% of the students black. It's a much more limited thing, and I think she's sort of right. Anyway, what the court said is diversity is not a compelling state interest, which technically you need to overcome to justify a race preference. But it did leave some outs. The outs are you can consider on an individual basis. You can't say you're black, you get 10 extra points in our ranking. You can't say you're black, and as an individual, you struggled against racism all your life, and you wrote about it in your student essay. So we're going to take your race into account on an individualized basis.
And that part's key, right? I mean, they have to write the essay to identify themselves, or
the administration has to find out some other way.
Right, but yeah. I think in theory, aren't they saying you have to write the essay? I mean, it has to be the essay that was judged as impressive enough to get you into the college, right? I don't think they're supposed to just know through some means other than box checking what your ethnicity is.
But they could find some other box. They could, if they were really sassy, they could have a box saying, "Were you subject to racial discrimination as a child?" And you could check it.
Well, I think I recall
many
that.
ways.
Sure, I'd check that box.
There are many ways, right? And the other thing they said is you can say if you were inspired by a leader of your race. So you can say I'm inspired by Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Frederick Douglass. But of course, a white person could say that too.
Well, you mean they could have a question on the admissions thing? Were you ever inspired by?
No, I'm just saying they shouldn't be reified about it. I mean, they just because essays are the one obvious venue now doesn't mean they can't come up with another venue, another means of getting this information. Anyway, so they left a wide ground for a very hard to police area for administrators can say, "Oh, we just did this on an individualized basis and boosted the level." So that's going to be the battle for the next 10 years or so. Is right-wing legal advocates saying, "Oh, this is just a subterfuge. You're really doing race quotas." University administrators defending it in court. And as Ann Coulter points out, you can get punitive damages if you win a civil rights suit against a university, and they have huge endowments. So if you're a lawyer, you have every financial incentive to sue the shit out of these people. And so we'll see what happens. What my takeaway from all this is as you know, is it doesn't say in the Constitution universities have to be meritocracies. They can say we're just we have some meritorious people, we have some unmeritorious people, because we think we can actually do more good for them by bringing them up to mediocrity or average or above average than if we took the very best people who are going to succeed anyway. So we have a mix of good people and bad people. We just take who we want, who we like, and we have a good time. We learn a lot of stuff, and then they go have jobs, and the market sorts them out. We don't credentialize. And why can't a college do that? Why isn't that the obvious way to go, as opposed to Yasha Monk, who said this is an opportunity to make the meritocracy more perfect and eliminate legacy admissions and eliminate all the arbitrariness? No, that's not the way to go. That makes it worse. That means the credential from Harvard is really all, if you're at the top of the meritocracy, you're anointed, you're credentialed. That's not the way to go.
Well, that's your kind of eccentric take on all this, because you're anti-meritocracy.
I don't know how eccentric it is, but that is my take.
So
I like arbitrariness. I like legacy admissions. Fine, you're in a club. You're going to college with your friends. Okay, so what?
So there's two possible rationales for emphasizing diversity, as it was emphasized and allowed as a goal by Bakke, the Bakke decision. I mean, I actually, my question is, what was the logic behind the Bakke decision? Because there's two possible values. There's the value of diversity for all the students at the college. In other words, the experience of white students is enriched by the presence of different kinds of students that maybe represent the kinds of people they'll encounter in their lifetime. And then separate from that, there's the goal of making, America's kind of elite stratum diverse. And the idea being that then you need a kind of diverse pipeline at elite colleges, and for that matter, some other colleges, to ensure that. Those are two different diversity rationales, right?
Right, and the first one is definitely there. I mean, all students benefit from, from it, and I sort of buy into that. Although there's always the compensating Robert Putnam point, which is people trust their own ethnic group more. So maybe if you were, looking for a cure for cancer, you really would trust people of your own ilk more and come to the cancer cure faster. I sort of doubt that, but it's an argument that nobody dares make. So
but you mean
the
you'll
first
trust the doctor of your own race?
No, you trust a fellow researcher is what I'm thinking.
So if you're like, I see.
I mean, it's a whole question of trust. People in diverse communities don't trust anybody. That's what Putnam shows, and he tries to disavow it. But that is the counter argument.
Right, but it's kind of known that the one way that ethnic mixing does break down like animosity between groups or stereotype or whatever is, or increase bonding, is if you put them in a non-zero sum situation. In other words, you put them on the same team in some sense. They're on the same lab team and they're competing with some other lab team. I think the literature is that when people are given a superordinate goal, I think is the other term for this kind of non-zero sum situation.
Is that better than having, the Korean team and the Chinese team and the Indian team and the American team
yes.
all competing with each other to find a cure for cancer? I don't know. I mean, it's an empirical question. It's an empirical question that the statistics, I doubt that the statistics you cite address that. Yes, it brings people together, but does it bring people together more than enough to compensate for the lack of trust? Anyway, that's sort of a side point. But Justice Jackson made both points. She's also wanted the representative. She cited a bogus statistic that was so bogus, I can't believe she put it in, that if you have a black maternity doctor, your child has is twice as likely to survive. Completely insane.
You're just saying that, or it's insane?
It's been completely debunked. First, it's a tiny difference. It's like 91.96 if you have a black doctor, 91.67 if you have a white doctor. Second, the really serious cases go to the ICU where they're mostly white doctors. So of course they're going to fail more because they take the more serious cases. So it's a statistically meaningless fact that somehow got into a major Supreme Court decision through the pipeline of cocoon bullshit that both sides suffer from. So
she said it was twice as likely when it was like less than 1% more likely or something.
Basically, yeah. I don't know where they got the twice as likely, but in my cocoon, we think it's bullshit. I don't know. Well. In her cocoon, she may have a response, but she thought both they want. It was more than just representative. She said there was an actual concrete benefit to having black pediatricians represented among the pediatricians. So that was the argument. Anyway, I'm. You have to handle, and the other question is, will there be political blowback? And the answer is less than Dobbs, because race preferences are way less popular than abortion rights. Second, Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and unlike Dobbs, where Alito said, this horrible piece of crap that we're clearing off the table and throwing in the garbage has existed too long. Thank God we're rid of the awful Roe decision. Roberts was very careful. First, Roberts is a much smoother character. He was very careful to ground this decision. Apparently, in the previous precedents, we said there was a time limit. Now we're saying the time limit is getting close, blah, blah, blah. And he left these outs, these loopholes of, the admissions essay and yes, I admired Martin Luther King and, all the other various loopholes open. So he held out some hope. And it just generally, the Roberts opinion goes down a whole lot smoother than the Alito opinion. So I don't think it's going to do the Republicans as much harm as Dobbs did. My God.
The admissions essay seems like a big loophole, and it seems like it's going to lead to a lot of essays about your experience as a member of your ethnic group.
Yeah.
There may have already been a lot. I don't know. But
the real damage is if they get rid of the SAT test completely, any test of merit, and rely solely on the essay, that seems like a complete it entrenches privilege in terms of who gets the smartest person to write their essay, and B, it opens up all this bullshit. Like I say, I said I was an admirer of Dag Hammarskjöld, whose book I had never read. So
you left out the last part, though.
I did leave out the last part. Somehow didn't fit on the page.
Well, you ran out of space. Yeah. Well. So, any other court cases? There were other court cases.
There's the two, I guess, obvious biggies that came down today are saying that Biden didn't have the authority to forgive $10,000 of student loans to 40 million people. And it seems to me that's a very close case. The statute said, the Secretary of Education has the power to modify or waive provisions of the student loan program during a time of crisis. This is a time of crisis. The pandemic, as he was waiving parts of the loan program. He didn't forgive it all. It seems it's like one of those judgment calls that you figure, why didn't the dissent have a point? So unless you want to say it's an illegal delegation of authority to delegate so much power to the education secretary, and this isn't the case where you want to draw that line. You want to make that delegation point. If the Congress says the Environmental Protection Agency shall take all appropriate laws to assure the public good, that's too vague a delegation. That's saying, okay, we've given up on making the laws. Here, you make them for us. We set up a program, and you're the what else is the Secretary of Education good for? You can modify it.
Of course, if the pandemic is the time of crisis, that's kind of past. On the other hand, when you're running for re-election, that's always kind of a time of crisis, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think it was waived. The fixed sum was waived during a time of crisis. I don't think, was it an ongoing program? I'm not sure it was.
See, but what I was thinking is, can he run on this? Say the Supreme Court denied you of the relief for your student loans. We need a Senate. We need to keep Democrats running the Senate, the way Republicans ran on Roe forever.
Of course, and it's much more plausible because you can get the Senate much easier than you get the Supreme Court. Yet the Republicans managed to do it. So,
you can do it. You can do it either way. You can say with the Senate we can get you a Supreme Court that'll be more favorable. You can also say even this Supreme Court would say Congress has the authority to give you student loan relief. Right. So give us 2 Democratic houses and we'll do it.
Right. Yes. He can certainly say that. I'm sure he will do that. He's going to come up with some sort of plan B solution next week.
All that said, it is kind of a socioeconomically biased thing. We shouldn't over caricature it. It's not like everyone who goes to college is rich. And in fact, if you're rich, you don't need to worry about the loans. But
you have to make under $125,000, which is rich in my book, to qualify for this. The other one is one of these. Do you have to bake a cake for a gay couple? It was a web designer who objected to making some design with an pro LGBTs. I don't know about the details of the case, but they said you can't force her to do something that's against her wishes, against her views, which seems to make sense to me. It's like we are, it all goes back to this article that Robert Bork wrote for the New Republic, where he said, it is the civil rights laws are a big deal to take a woman who runs a boarding house and say, we are taking away your decision for who can be in your boarding house. That's sort of all the power she has. That's where she sees her meaning in the world is she can run this sort of sphere. And if the state says, no, we're taking over your sphere, that's a big deal. We have to do that for race. That was not Bork's position. That's certainly my position. Race is so important, but we don't have to do it for every fucking cause that comes down the pike. And that was the point of Chris Caldwell's book, that once the liberals had taken over this personal sphere, they didn't stop. So now they're telling you what web designs you can do. And that's insane. She argues, and I assume it's true.
But if it were race, would you say that would be insane, the web designs? I mean, you're not saying web designs are insane. You're saying that sexual orientation is in a different category from race.
Well, she says she didn't not do designs for gay people. She just didn't do designs that had this message. So if you said, of course I will serve black people, which I think you have to do under the law. But I am not going to do a pro, Black Lives Matter thing for you because I don't like it. I would defend her on that grounds, as long as you didn't. But that would be a highly. As long as you
didn't do that for a white person. On the other hand, the equivalent for the white person, anyway, it could get complicated.
But you got a right of free speech. Free speech means you can take offensive positions. You can charge money for them. I don't know. But that would be the key case. You're right. That would be where the rubber meets the road on that one. So there were those two decisions.
Those are the big ones.
And people are getting, despite Justice Roberts' best efforts to be, smooth and oleaginous about it all, the left is getting the distinct impression that the Supreme Court is against them and is on a rampage. And I think Roberts realizes that, and he's trying to back off the pressure as much as he can. But
hence the admissions essay loophole.
And hence him taking the opinion himself, and hence him defending the court's legitimacy. Hence him trying in Dobbs to soften the abortion decision. But he failed. He doesn't have a 5-4 majority. He has a 6-3 majority, which is much worse for him. Now, anyway, for some reason, I have new respect for Roberts, even though I had complete contempt for him before.
Oh, I've never had contempt for him.
His DACA decision was pretty bad. But it was of an ilk. He obviously said it would reflect really badly on the court if we took away the right of all these so-called dreamers that Obama, tried to half pardon. And so he came up with a completely crazy reason for not doing that.
So one more question about this. So is it the fact that if you look at the Supreme Court's rationale for anti-racial discrimination stuff, and you look at their rationale for sexual orientation stuff like gay marriage, are the rationales rooted in the same kind of constitutional logic? Are they rooted in different amendments or what?
Well, no, they're rooted in the same constitutional logic, but the constitutional logic always seems very formal and strict, and that's its virtue. The virtue of the Warren Court is it established this whole edifice of equal protection, where if it was an immutable trait or a fundamental right, you needed strict scrutiny to overcome it. You needed a compelling state interest to justify a discrimination, but these strict categories always collapse. So women come along and they say, "Hey, we're like blacks, we get strict scrutiny too," and the court says, "Not so fast. We'll give intermediate scrutiny to you." And this one, they tried to cram diversity as a compelling state interest, but if you look at it, it sort of breaks down. It's not a compelling state interest, but it's a valid interest. So maybe the whole idea of if it has to be a compelling state interest is bullshit. Maybe it should be able to be sort of a medium-sized interest, which diversity is. And so all these, yes, it is the same structure, but all the structure breaks down when the court starts considering, are gays really like blacks? Are women really like blacks? And the answer is they're all sui generis. Nobody's like blacks. And the attempt to insert yourself into the role of blacks is sort of
when you say
disreputable at this point.
when you say nobody's like blacks, you mean nobody has the distinctive history in
history, right? Is it immutable? The black thing is immutable. It's right there on your face. People can tell it. The gay thing is maybe immutable, probably immutable. We don't know. There's, the whole trans thing is maybe it's not so immutable, and it's not right there on your face that you're carrying around for your entire life. So it's different. It's pretty close to blacks, but it's not like blacks.
If by immutable, you
women
mean
are biologically different, so that's different than blacks, right?
Well, sex discrimination is a whole nother thing we haven't even touched on. But the if by mutable you mean something you can't readily change by choice, I think a due humility compels me to assume that it is. My sexual attraction to women is not something I could have changed, and yours probably isn't either, right? That's I don't see any reason to believe that anyone's
Actually, Richard Hanania is working on obviously
an app that
thread.
can change it.
No, a tweet thread saying, well, this immutability thing, maybe it's there are little things you can do with chromosomes and hormones, and people.
Well, sure, if you want to intervene at that level.
Okay.
So
anyway, I agree with you that I think homosexuality is maybe, or sexuality is maybe immutable, and I'm not sure that carries today, but that's one factor in their favor. And I don't think you should discriminate against gays. And the immutability is certainly a heavy thing weighing. But if you're in a bar, I guess my argument was if you're running a gay bar and you only want gay people in there because you want people to be able to be hit on by the people that they expect to be hit on, it gets a little muddy. I don't know. I've gotten into trouble by going down that line of reasoning before, so I will shut up. But
uncharacteristic wisdom.
You should not be able to do that with blacks and whites, to say, only one race in here. But if you sort of, anyway, you got my point.
So you heard
Andrew Sullivan will say gays bars don't discriminate against non-gays, and a whole bunch of people say, "Oh, you've never been to this bar in France," et cetera, et cetera.
Speaking of France, now first of all, you heard the sound. That's our cue to start moving toward the Parrot Room quickly. Well, in France, I guess they're kind of having their George Floyd moment, but I don't have anything particular to say about that. If you do, maybe we can talk about that.
Except the press is doing a very good job of covering up the fact that it's basically
an ethnic thing.
An ethnic thing in the banlieues, which are ethnic ghettos.
Yeah, I had to do a little.
And they're erupting just like our ghettos do. So that's what's going on.
But I think it may be like George Floyd in that there are a number of whites on the left who are supporting it. Like the George Floyd protests, there were a lot of heavily white protests.
But right, and it's also unlike right. All the people that got killed in that shooting were all white people. It's also unlike our situation in that the people in the ghettos are immigrants, more recent immigrants, way more recent than the people who were in what's left of our ghettos. So, in theory, it should have real-time consequences for France trying to consider how many more of these people do we really want to take if we're having so much trouble absorbing them. That's not true in our situation.
Okay. Now, finally, on an uncharacteristic note of self-congratulation, do you remember me saying last week, I think we've reached peak RFK? Did or did not his poll numbers begin to plummet a nanosecond after I said that?
That's true, but you were coincidentally, Bob, maybe you got the memo too, with a huge media campaign designed to drive down his poll numbers.
Well, I said that was one thing that was going on. I said two things. I thought a lot of the 20% who had said, sure, I love Kennedy's. Yeah, sign me up. Once they heard again, he has this, he has an kind of affliction, this kind of dystonia is the technical term for the muscular disorder that leaves his voice sounding very strange. Yeah. And I think a number of people heard him and went, that's weird. But also separate from that, this campaign was launched once he reached a certain amount of prominence to convince liberals that he's crazy.
Right. I'm, and we'll talk about this, Parrot Room. Biden launched his campaign based on Bidenomics. Biden isn't looking that bad as far as the economy goes, certainly, which is usually the most important thing in an election. We can talk about this. Biden's problem is not Biden, however senile you think he is. Biden's problem is Kamala Harris. If he had a backup who Americans trusted, who was ready to step in, if Biden faltered, if he had a heart attack, if people decided he was too senile to go on, it wouldn't be a big deal. But he doesn't do that. That's his own damn fault for picking her. The Biden problem, his record isn't that bad. His basic problem is he has no backup. So he's leading the nation over a cliff because he ain't going to make it for 6 more years.
So you didn't think the Biden problem was Biden this week when he said, quote, Putin is clearly losing the war in Iraq?
No, that's like me last week. I say it all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't vote for you. That's why.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob.
It's just that in your case, there are other reasons as well. And then there was that. Now, this was taken out of context, I'm sure, but we can discuss it in the pair. There was another weird take. Anyway, finally, I got to say, earlier this week, I was thinking, Kennedy, he'd actually be better off running as a Republican, probably. I mean, maybe not because Trump just has one block of the vote so locked up, but in a way, it makes as much sense. And then I heard yesterday on the DMZ podcast, Bill Scher and Matt Lewis, I think Bill brought it up first, saying, you can imagine a Trump-Kennedy ticket, that this is the kind of weird idea Trump would like.
Yes. It's also possible that Kennedy could, seems unlikely given his name, but could pursue a third-party candidacy.
I think he has said he wouldn't, right?
Okay, maybe he has. But you remember, he makes a big deal about that his father, when his father was killed, his voters went to George Wallace. They didn't go to the Democrats. So it is possible that he obviously does think he can draw from both sides. And it wouldn't be crazy. He obviously does not think he would only draw from Democrats. So it wouldn't be crazy for him to attempt it, although I think it would screw Biden more than Trump.
Okay. So what are we going to talk about in the Parrot Room?
Okay. Well, in politics, there's Tucker Carlson's pick for the substitute for Biden. What I think the Republican strategy should be. We have Bidenomics versus the new Republican flavor of the year is national conservatism, Orrin Cass, the people who have sort of renounced the fundamentals of free market economics. A little thing to say about that. There's the band name of the year, which we can derive from, every time there's a headline with a new concept like, controlling legal authority, everybody said, hey, controlling legal authority, that's a good band name.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the best one ever. There's Matthew Yglesias saying liberals have higher IQs. There's a prominent pro DeSantis tweeter who was unmasked by Breitbart of all people for saying allegedly anti-Semitic things 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that. We can talk about there's some new evidence suspect that the COVID virus was not just escape, but it was a bioweapon. We have somebody complaining that women were hunters, not just gatherers. I sent that to you.
Mm-hmm.
We have COVID fraud. We have the movie Silo, which I watched another
the
episode
TV
of.
series Silo, the final episode of which was released last night. And I'm going to make a guess about. I haven't watched it. We're going to watch it tonight. And I'm going to make a guess about a big reveal.
My guess is it won't tie up all the loose ends because they want a second.
Well, it won't because they want a second season. But I have a theory about the big reveal. Also, I watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers as I was instructed to do. So I'm ready to discuss that. Did you watch The Day the Earth Stood Still?
I didn't. Was I supposed to do that?
Mickey. Okay. I'll
sorry.
pick up slack. I have a little more to say about UFOs, a little more to say about the Titanic submersible, the Titan.
Alan Arkin died.
Oh, did he? Oh, Alan
Yeah.
Arkin. I always got him mixed up with Alan Alda, but now I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, go
you
ahead,
can talk about him, and I can talk about Alan Alda if you want, but nothing happened with him. I want to talk more about the Ukraine war a little, kind of generally. Also about media reporting on this. The Russians struck this city, Kramatorsk, and there's an interesting backstory on Western media coverage of that. A little more detail on the reasons to worry about a false flag attack at the nuclear plant. Just a little more detail. And I think that's pretty much it from me. So you have a lot of stuff. We have a ton of stuff all together.
And I have even more stuff, but it's sort of boring. So,
okay, yeah, let's
like Tony Blinken. Tony Blinken's trip to China, not so bad.
Oh, I'd be willing to argue with you. Well, the trip itself was not so bad. You're right.
Okay.
Right. But I'll write that down in case you want to talk about him.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, and also people should smash the like button. By the way, there's a new YouTube policy. Have you heard about this? You're supposed to smash the like button whether you like something or dislike it. This is straight down. This was a memo from YouTube. You're supposed to smash the like button either way. You didn't hear about this, Mickey?
What? They come and arrest you if you don't?
Yeah, they will arrest you. In fact, that's the other part. If you watch a video and don't smash the like button, you will be arrested. I meant to mention that part. Thank you for reminding me. But anyway, in the end, it's up to you, folks. Do what you feel is right. You don't have to smash the like button. It's, prison has its virtues. So do smash the like button. The Parrot Room is patreon.com/Parrot Room is the avenue to all that fabulous bonus content. And now we're from the Parrot.
Smash the like button is a bad band name.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you my daughter's band name. They have what I think is a pretty good band name. The band
Your daughter's in a band?
Of course, everyone in Brooklyn's in a band.
Is she the singer? Does she play an instrument?
Both daughters are in this, and I think they do different things. Both of them are somewhat conversant in guitar and piano.
I want to be in Brooklyn.
It's the happening place, man.
If everybody's in a band, I want to be there.
It's not too late. I'll put in a good word for you.
I was looking for a rock show to go to this weekend, the next week. There was nobody I'd heard of except every venue, practically every day, Neil Young is performing. And, it's like he's giving like 30 concerts in LA next week, including a big one at the Greek, but little ones too. And I realized I have no desire to see a guy as old as Neil Young.
You know, a song I've started to think is actually very good is Harvest Moon.
Okay. He's written a lot of good songs, just not any in the last 20 years.
Wow. Greatest hit.
He's produced stuff that's been crap. That's the problem. If you're just saying the oldies, it'd be okay.
But he speaks highly of your work, Mickey. Okay.
I know.
Heading into the Parrot Room,
what can I say?